What would you do if a single letter led you to a new life, only to find it was all a lie? Step into 1878 Colorado, where one woman's courage and a forgotten child rewrite the meaning of family. Ready for a story that'll steal your heart? The Bay. Sun hung low over the jagged peaks of Colorado's San Juan Mountains, casting long shadows across the dusty road into silver pines. It was late summer, 1878, and the air carried the sharp tang of pine and the distant clatter of mining picks. Clara Whitmore clutched a worn leather satchel, her only possession besides the crumpled letter in her pocket. The stagecoach rattled to a stop, its wheels groaning like a tired beast, and Clara stepped onto the splintered wooden platform of a town she'd never seen before. Her heart pounded, not from the altitude but from the weight of a promise that had brought her here, a promise now trembling on the edge of doubt. Back in Chicago, Clara had been a seamstress, her days swallowed by the hum of factory machines and the ache of long hours. Her life had been a gray blur until Thomas Brennan's letter arrived, its words inked with dreams of a shared future. He'd described a cozy cabin in Silver Pines, a mining town nestled in Colorado's untamed heart, where they'd build a life together. "I'm lonely without you," he'd written, his handwriting bold yet tender. Clara had sold her few belongings, quit her job, and boarded a train west, chasing a husband she'd never met. Now, standing on this creaky platform, she scanned the sparse crowd for a man with brown hair and a good hat, just as Thomas had promised. The platform was nearly deserted. A grizzled miner leaned against a post, spitting tobacco into the dust. A young woman with a tired face herded two children toward a wagon. No Thomas. Clara's fingers tightened around the letter, its edges soft from her constant touch. "Last. Stop, miss," the driver barked, his voice rough as gravel. He tossed her small trunk onto the platform with a thud. "You stayin' or goin'?" "Staying," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She smoothed her faded green dress, its hem frayed from the journey, and forced a smile. Surely Thomas was just late. The mountains were vast, the roads treacherous. He'd come. The stagecoach rumbled away, kicking up a cloud of red dust that stung Clara's eyes. She stood alone, the miner's curious glance prickling her skin. "You looking for someone, miss?" he asked, squinting. "Thomas Brennan," Clara said, her voice steadier now. "Do you know him?" The miner's face tightened, his jaw working as if chewing on bad news. "Brennan? He ain't here. Left town a month back. Skipped out on debts, folks say. Packed up and vanished." He shook his head, almost apologetic. "Sorry, miss." Clara's stomach lurched, as if the ground had dropped beneath her. "Left?" she echoed. "But we were to be married today." Her words felt foolish, like a child's wish spoken aloud. The miner shuffled, uncomfortable. "Heard he owed money to half the town. Guess he figured running was easier than paying." He tipped his hat and walked off, leaving Clara rooted to the platform, her satchel heavy in her arms. A soft voice broke her daze. "You must be Clara." A woman approached, her brown hair tucked under a bonnet, her eyes kind, but etched with worry. "I'm Eliza, married to the blacksmith. Heard you were coming for Thomas. I'm sorry you're hearing this news." Clara nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to cry, to scream, but pride held her tears at bay. "What do I do now?" she asked, more to herself than Eliza. "You can't stand here all day," Eliza said gently. "Come with me. Thomas's cabin ain't far. Maybe you'll find answers there." They walked through Silver Pines, a scrappy town of weathered storefronts and clapboard houses dwarfed by towering peaks. The general store's sign creaked in the wind. The saloon's laughter spilled into the street. Clara felt the weight of curious stares, her outsider status as clear as the dust on her boots. Eliza led her down a narrow path lined with aspens, their leaves shimmering like coins in the fading light. The air grew cooler, scented with earth and resin, and Clara's trunk bumped along behind them, pulled by Eliza's husband, Caleb, on a rickety cart. "There it is," Eliza said, pointing to a small cabin nestled among the trees. Its logs were weathered, its single window smudged with grime. It looked more like a forgotten dream than the home Thomas had promised. Clara's heart sank, but she squared her shoulders. She'd come this far. Eliza pushed open the door, and Clara stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The cabin was a single room, cluttered with signs of hasty departure. Clothes strewn across the floor, a half-empty whiskey bottle on a rickety table. The air smelled of stale smoke and neglect. Clara's gaze swept the room, searching for any trace of Thomas when a faint sound stopped her cold, a soft, plaintive whimper from the corner. She turned, her breath catching. In a wooden crate lined with a tattered quilt lay a baby, his tiny face framed by dark curls, his blue eyes wide and searching, locked onto hers. Clara froze, her heart a tangle of shock and something she couldn't yet name. Who was this child? And what did he mean for the life she'd crossed a continent to find? What secrets did Thomas leave behind in this lonely cabin, and would Clara dare to uncover them? Clara Whitmore stood frozen in the dim cabin, her eyes locked on the tiny figure nestled in the wooden crate. The baby's soft whimpers echoed in the silence, each sound tugging at something deep within her chest. His dark curls framed a face, so delicate it seemed carved from porcelain, and his blue eyes, bright as the Colorado sky, held her gaze with an intensity that felt almost wise. The air in Thomas Brennan's abandoned cabin was thick with dust and the faint, sour scent of neglect, but this child, this unexpected life, was a spark in the gloom. Clara's satchel slipped from her hands, thudding softly on the plank floor. "Who is he?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the creak of the cabin's walls. She glanced at Eliza, who lingered by the door, her bonnet casting shadows across her worried face. Eliza stepped closer, her boots scuffing the uneven floor. "That's Samuel," she said, her tone heavy with something unspoken. "Thomas's boy, his mother. She didn't make it. Died a week after giving birth, poor soul. Fever took her fast." Eliza's eyes softened as she looked at the baby. Thomas tried to care for him, but he wasn't cut out for it. Left Samuel with neighbors most days while he chased silver in the mines. Then he up and left altogether. Clara's mind reeled. Thomas's letters had painted a picture of a hopeful future, fields of wildflowers, a warm hearth, a life built together. Not once had he mentioned a child. She knelt beside the crate, her green dress pooling around her. Samuel's tiny hand reached out, grasping at the air, and without thinking, Clara extended her finger. His grip was firm, surprising for such a small creature, and a warmth spread through her, chasing away the chill of her shattered plans. "How old is he?" Clara asked, unable to look away from Samuel's face. He gurgled softly, his eyes never leaving hers as if he sensed her turmoil. 6 months, maybe 7, Eliza replied. "Hard to say exactly. He was born small and with his mama gone." She trailed off, then pulled a cloth-wrapped bottle from her basket. "I've been stopping by to feed him when I can, but with 3 young'uns of my own, it's a struggle. Here, you try." Clara hesitated. She'd never held a baby, let alone fed one. Her life in Chicago had been needles and thread, not cradles and lullabies. But Eliza's encouraging nod nudged her forward. She took the bottle, its warmth startling against her cold hands, and gently lifted Samuel from the crate. His weight was slight, yet he felt solid, real. She settled into a rickety chair, cradling him awkwardly at first, then finding a rhythm as he latched onto the bottle, drinking eagerly. His tiny hands pressed against the glass, and Clara felt a strange calm settle over her, like the quiet after a storm. "He's hungry," she murmured, more to herself than Eliza. Samuel's eyes fluttered, half closed, and a tiny smile curved his lips. Clara's heart ached, not with sorrow, but with a longing she hadn't known she carried. She'd come to Silver Pines for a husband, but this child, this fragile life, seemed to ask something more of her. Eliza watched, her expression a mix of pity and respect. "Clara, you don't have to decide nothing right now, but that boy needs someone. There's an orphanage in Denver 2 days by stagecoach. Or maybe someone in town could take him, though most folks here are stretched thin." Clara's thoughts Flashed to the orphanage she'd known as a girl in Chicago. Cold beds, meager meals, and a loneliness that clung like damp wool. She looked down at Samuel, now dozing in her arms, his breath a soft rhythm against her shoulder. An orphanage? The idea felt wrong, like betraying something sacred. But what could she offer? She had no money, no home, no plan. Her savings were gone, spent on the train ticket west. Her parents were long dead, her sister in Kansas a distant memory after a falling out over a suitor Clara had refused. "I don't know what to do," Clara admitted, her voice trembling. "I came here for Thomas, for a life. Now he's gone, and there's him." She nodded toward Samuel, whose warmth against her chest felt like an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Eliza placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You've got a good heart, Clara. That's more than most. Take tonight to think on it. I'll bring some milk and blankets tomorrow. Caleb can fix up this place a bit, make it livable, but you gotta decide what's next." Clara nodded, though her mind was a tangle of fear and possibility. The cabin was a wreck, leaky roof, grimy windows, mouse droppings in the corners. Yet, as she looked around, she saw potential. A hearth that could glow with warmth, a table where she might teach Samuel his letters one day. The thought startled her. Was she really considering this? Staying in a stranger's cabin, raising a stranger's child? As Eliza and Caleb left, promising to return at dawn, Clara sat with Samuel, the cabin growing darker as the sun dipped behind the mountains. She hummed a half-remembered lullaby, the notes shaky but soothing. Samuel stirred, his tiny hand curling around her finger again, and Clara felt a spark of resolve ignite within her. She'd come west chasing a promise, but maybe the real promise was here in this child's trust in the choice she now faced. Outside, the wind whispered through the aspens, carrying the distant howl of a coyote. Clara held Samuel closer, her mind racing. Could she, a woman with nothing, become everything to this boy? And what secrets had Thomas left behind that might unravel the fragile hope she was beginning to feel? As night falls over Silver Pines, will Clara find the courage to embrace a life she never planned? Or will the shadows of Thomas's past pull her under? The first rays of dawn slipped through the cabin's grimy window, painting golden streaks across the plank floor where Clara Whitmore sat, Samuel still cradled in her arms. The baby's soft breaths were a quiet rhythm against the mornings. Hush. But Clara's mind was a storm of doubt and determination. The Colorado air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-soaked pine and the distant clang of silver pines waking to life. She'd spent the night in Thomas Brennan's abandoned cabin, wrestling with a choice that felt bigger than the mountains looming outside. Stay and care for this child, or leave and face a world that had already turned its back on her. Clara rose, her limbs stiff from the hard chair, and gently laid Samuel in his crate, tucking the tattered quilt around him. The cabin was a mess, cracked walls, a sagging roof, a hearth cold with ash. But it had potential, like a rough stone waiting to be polished. She traced her fingers along the table, imagining it scrubbed clean, set with a simple meal for two. The thought of building a home here for Samuel stirred a warmth she hadn't felt since her mother's lullabies back in Chicago. But could she do it? A woman alone, with no money, no skills beyond stitching, and a baby who wasn't hers. The door creaked open and Eliza stepped inside, her arms laden with a basket of supplies, milk, a loaf of bread, a bundle of clean rags. Caleb followed, his blacksmith's shoulders filling the doorway, carrying a toolbox that clinked with promise. "Morning, Clara," Eliza said, her smile cautious but kind. "Thought you might need these. Got some milk for Samuel, and Caleb's here to patch up that roof before the next rain." Clara's throat tightened with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice catching. I think I'm staying. For Samuel, at least for now." Eliza's eyes widened, then softened. "That's a brave choice, Clara. Not an easy one, but brave." She set the basket on the table and began unpacking, her movements brisk but gentle. "This cabin's sturdy enough, just needs love. We'll help you get started. Milk, food, whatever you need." You're not alone. Caleb nodded, already inspecting a loose board by the window. I'll fix the leaks and shore up the walls. Won't take but a day or two. His gruff voice held a warmth that eased Clara's nerves. She watched him work, hammer in hand, and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Silver Pines wasn't just a place to pass through. Maybe it could be home. As the morning unfolded, Clara took her first steps into this new life. She boiled water over the rekindled hearth, her hands trembling as she warmed Samuel's milk. Feeding him felt less daunting now, his eager gulps, a small victory. Eliza showed her how to change his rags, her instructions patient but firm. He's a good boy, Eliza said, brushing a curl from Samuel's forehead. He trusts you already. Clara smiled, but her thoughts wandered to Thomas. Why had he hidden Samuel in his letters? Was he ashamed or simply careless? The questions gnawed at her, but they faded when Samuel grabbed her finger, his tiny grip, a silent plea to stay. She sang to him softly, a hymn her mother had loved, and the cabin seemed less empty, its shadows less heavy. By midday, the townsfolk began to notice Clara's presence. A gray-haired woman named Mabel, who ran the general store, stopped by with a jar of preserves and a curious glance. Heard you're taking on Thomas's boy, she said, her tone equal parts suspicion and respect. That's no small thing. Most would have run back east by now. I'm not most, Clara replied, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Mabel raised an eyebrow, then nodded as if satisfied, and left with a promise to send over some flour. As the sun climbed higher, Clara stepped outside to fetch water from the nearby creek, its babble a soothing contrast to the town's distant clamor. The mountains stood like sentinels, their peaks dusted with the first hints of autumn snow. She filled her bucket, her reflection wavering in the clear water. A woman with tired eyes but a set jaw. She wasn't the naive girl who'd boarded the train in Chicago. She was something new, something untested. Back at the cabin, Samuel napped, and Clara began scrubbing the floor, her hands raw but determined. Each stroke felt like a claim, a vow to make this place her own. But as she worked, a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up, expecting Eliza or Caleb, but instead saw a stranger, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a dress too fine for Silver Pines. Her dark hair was pinned elegantly, and her blue eyes, so like Samuel's, gleamed with purpose. I'm Margaret Brennan, the woman said, her voice cool as a winter stream. Thomas's sister, I've come for my nephew. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping the cabin with undisguised disdain. This is no place for a child of my blood. Clara's heart stuttered. She stood, clutching the rag, water dripping onto the floor. Margaret's words were a blade, cutting through the fragile hope she'd begun to build. Had Thomas's past just walked through her door, threatening to take Samuel away? Who is this woman, and what claim does she hold over the child Clara has already begun to love? Clara Whitmore stood in the doorway of the cabin, her hands still damp from scrubbing the floor, as Margaret Brennan's words echoed like a thunderclap in the quiet of Silver Pines. The woman's elegant figure seemed out of place against the rough-hewn logs, her silk dress catching the midday light like a jewel in the dust. Her blue eyes, so like Samuel's, bore into Clara with a mix of determination and disdain. I've come for my nephew, Margaret repeated, stepping closer, her boots clicking on the wooden floor. Samuel belongs with family, real family, in Boston, not in this shack. Clara's chest tightened, her rag slipping from her fingers. She glanced at Samuel, still napping in his crate, his tiny chest rising and falling with innocent trust. He's been mine to care for, Clara said, her voice low but firm. I fed him, held him, sung to him. I'm all he knows. The words felt like a shield, but they wavered under Margaret's piercing gaze. Margaret's lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. Admirable, I'm sure, but sentiment doesn't make a home. I have wealth, connections, a proper house, with servants. Samuel deserves more than a pauper's life in a mining town. She pulled a folded document from her satchel, its crisp edges stark against the cabin's grime. This is a letter from my lawyer in Denver. It confirms my legal right as Thomas's sister to take custody. You have no claim, Miss Whitmore. Clara's. Knees weakened, but she gripped the door frame to steady herself. "Legal right," she said, her voice rising. "What about love? What about the nights I've walked this floor when he was fussy, or the days I've gone hungry to buy his milk?" Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry. Not in front of this woman. Margaret's expression flickered. Something like respect, quickly smothered. "Love doesn't pay for doctors or schools. It doesn't keep a child warm in winter." She gestured at the cabin's cracked walls. "This place is barely standing. I leave for Denver tomorrow, and Samuel comes with me." The words hit Clara, like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to argue, but a sharp cry from Samuel interrupted her. He was awake, his blue eyes wide with need. Clara hurried to him, lifting him from the crate, his warmth grounding her racing heart. "Hush, little one," she murmured, rocking him gently. Margaret watched, her face unreadable, but her fingers tightened around the satchel. Eliza, who had been lingering outside, stepped into the doorway, her eyes darting between the two women. "Margaret, is it? You're Thomas's kin, so I'll speak plain. Clara's given that boy more than Thomas ever did. She's made a home here, rough as it is." Her voice was steady, but her hands twisted nervously in her apron. Margaret turned, her posture stiff. "I don't doubt her effort, but effort isn't enough. Samuel is a Brennan. He belongs in Boston, where he'll have opportunities, not hardships." She paused, her gaze softening slightly as it fell on Samuel. "He's all I have left of my brother." Clara's anger flared, hot and sudden. "Then where were you when Thomas left him here alone? When he needed family?" She held Samuel closer, his soft weight a reminder of every sleepless night, every small victory. "I'm his family now." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, a distant shout broke the tension. "Fire! Fire at the livery!" The cry came from the direction of Silver Pines, followed by the frantic clanging of a bell. Clara's heart lurched. She stepped outside, Samuel in her arms, and saw a plume of black smoke rising above the treetops. The town was in chaos, men running with buckets, women shouting for their children. "We have to help," Clara said, her voice urgent. She turned to Eliza. "Can you take Samuel? Keep him safe?" Eliza nodded, reaching for the baby, but Margaret stepped forward, her fine dress already dusted with ash carried by the wind. "I'm coming too," Margaret said, her tone resolute. "If this town matters to Samuel, it matters to me." Clara stared, stunned by the woman's sudden shift, but there was no time to question it. She handed Samuel to Eliza and ran toward the smoke, Margaret's footsteps pounding behind her. The livery was ablaze, flames licking the wooden walls, horses neighing in panic. Townsfolk formed a bucket line from the creek, their faces grim with determination. Clara joined them, passing heavy buckets until her arms ached, the heat searing her skin. Through the smoke, she saw Margaret, her elegant dress soaked and smudged, heaving water alongside the miners. For a moment, their eyes met, and Clara saw something new in Margaret's gaze. Fear, yes, but also a fierce resolve. Then a scream pierced the air. "The children! They're in the meeting house!" Clara's blood ran cold. The meeting house, a small building used for town gatherings, stood dangerously close to the livery, its roof already sparking with embers. Through the window, she glimpsed 3 small figures huddled inside, their cries barely audible over the roar of the fire. Without thinking, Clara dropped her bucket and sprinted toward the meeting house. Margaret was right behind her, her breath ragged. "The door's blocked," Clara shouted, shoving against the swollen wood. Margaret grabbed a shovel from a nearby cart and swung it at the window, glass shattering like a burst of stars. Together, they climbed through, the smoke stinging their eyes, the heat pressing against them like a living thing. Inside, the air was thick, choking. Clara dropped to her knees, crawling toward the children's cries. Would they reach them in time? Or would the fire, and Margaret's claim, consume everything Clara was fighting to hold on to? In the heart of the flames, can Clara and Margaret save the children, and perhaps find a way to save each other, to save each? The meeting house was a furnace, its air thick with acrid smoke that clawed at Clara Whitmore's lungs. She crawled across the rough floor, her hands scraping against splinters, guided only by the faint, desperate cries of the children trapped within. Beside her, Margaret Brennan moved with surprising grit, her fine silk dress now torn and streaked with soot. The heat pressed against them like a living beast, and the crackle of flames grew louder, a hungry roar that drowned out the chaos outside. Clara's heart pounded, not just for the children but for the fragile bond she was fighting to protect with Samuel. A bond now threatened by Margaret's legal claim and the fire's merciless advance. Here, Margaret's voice cut through the haze, hoarse but steady. Clara scrambled toward the sound, her eyes stinging as she found Margaret crouched in a corner. 3 children huddled there, a girl no older than 7, her braids singed, clutching, a younger boy whose face was streaked with tears, and a toddler girl coughing violently. Their wide eyes gleamed with terror in the flickering light. "We've got to move fast," Clara said, her voice raw. She scooped up the toddler, her small body trembling against Clara's chest. Margaret lifted the boy while the older girl clung to her skirt, coughing but determined. The window they'd entered through was now a frame of glowing embers, the shattered glass glinting like jagged teeth. Clara's stomach twisted. There was no way back through it. "The door!" Margaret shouted, pointing to the swollen wooden entrance they'd tried before. Clara nodded, shifting the toddler to one arm as she grabbed a fallen chair. Together they slammed it against the door, the wood splintering under their combined force. Smoke poured in, thicker now, and Clara's vision blurred, but she kept swinging, her arms burning with effort. With a final heave, the door gave way, tumbling outward in a cloud of ash. Hands reached through the opening, townsfolk, their faces grim but relieved, pulling the children to safety. Clara passed the toddler to a waiting pair of arms, then helped the older girl climb out. Margaret followed with the boy, her movements steady despite the blood trickling from a cut on her hand. Clara was the last to emerge, collapsing onto the grass, her lungs screaming as she gulped the cool mountain air. The meeting house groaned behind them, its roof caving in with a shower of sparks. Dr. Amos, the town's grizzled physician, rushed over, his coat smudged with soot. "The children are shaken but alive," he called, checking their pulses. "You two saved them, brave work." His eyes lingered on Clara and Margaret, a rare respect in his weathered gaze. Clara coughed, her throat raw, and looked at Margaret, who sat beside her, her once pristine dress now a ruin. The Boston woman's face was black with soot, her dark hair loose and tangled, but her blue eyes, Samuel's eyes, held a new softness. For the first time, Clara saw not a rival, but a woman who had risked her life alongside her. "Why did you do it?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have stayed safe. You didn't have to help." Margaret wiped a trembling hand across her face, smearing the soot. "I came here thinking you were just a dreamer clinging to my nephew. For a roof over your head," she said, her voice low. "But you ran into that fire without hesitation, for children who weren't yours. I misjudged you." Clara's chest tightened, not from smoke but from the weight of Margaret's words. She thought of Samuel, safe with Eliza, and the nights she'd spent rocking him through fevers, singing hymns to calm his cries. "I love him," she said simply. "He's mine, not by blood, but by choice." Margaret nodded, her gaze distant, as she watched the townsfolk douse the last flames. The livery was gone, reduced to smoldering beams, but the meeting house still stood, scarred but intact. "Thomas wrote to me before he left," she said, her voice breaking. "He said he'd left Samuel with a mail-order bride who'd probably abandon him. He was wrong about you, Clara. So was I." Tears pricked Clara's eyes, mixing with the grime on her face. "Does this mean you'll let Samuel stay with me?" she asked, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. Margaret's lips parted, but before she could answer, Eliza hurried over, Samuel in her arms. His blue eyes lit up at the sight of Clara, his chubby hands reaching for her. Clara took him, holding him close, his familiar weight grounding her amidst the chaos. Margaret watched, her expression unreadable, then spoke. "Samuel belongs with You, Clara. But I want to be part of his life if you'll let me. Clara stared, stunned. Was this the same woman who'd threatened to take Samuel to Boston? Before she could respond, a new sound cut through the air. A horse's hooves, pounding up the path. A man in a black suit dismounted, his leather satchel gleaming with authority. "Miss Brennan," he called, his voice sharp. "The judge in Denver sent me. We need to settle the matter of the child now." Clara's heart sank. The fire was out, but a new battle was just beginning. Could she hold on to Samuel against the law's cold reach, with a stranger's arrival threatening to tear Samuel away? Will Clara's courage and Margaret's change of heart be enough to keep their family whole? The smoke had cleared from Silver Pines, but a new storm loomed as Clara Whitmore stood outside her cabin, clutching Samuel to her chest. His soft babbling was a fragile anchor against the man in the black suit who'd just dismounted, his leather satchel gleaming with the weight of authority. "Miss Brennan," he said again, his voice cutting through the mountain air. "I'm Mr. Langley, sent by the territorial judge in Denver. We must resolve the custody of the child." Clara's heart thudded, her arms tightening around Samuel. The fire had tested her courage, but this man's cold formality threatened to unravel everything she'd fought for. Margaret Brennan stepped forward, her soot-streaked dress a stark contrast to her composed posture. "Mr. Langley," she said, her voice steady but softer than before. "I've reconsidered my claim. Samuel's place is here with Clara." The words hung in the air, a quiet miracle that made Clara's breath catch. Margaret turned to her, those blue eyes, Samuel's eyes, now warm with something like kinship. "He's yours, Clara. You're his mother." Mr. Langley's brow furrowed, his fingers tightening on his satchel. "Miss Brennan, you're legal. Rights are clear. As the child's aunt, you have precedence over an unmarried woman with no relation." His gaze flicked to Clara, dismissive, and she felt the sting of her own vulnerability. No family, no wealth, just a heart that had chosen Samuel. Before Clara could speak, a new voice broke the tension. "Hold on now." Reverend Tate, Silver, Pine's weathered preacher, rode up on a dusty mare, his black coat flapping like a raven's wings. "I've been praying on this matter all night, and I've got something to say." He dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel path. "Family ain't just blood. It's the promises we keep, the sacrifices we make. Clara's kept every promise to that boy. Fed him, loved him, risked her life in that fire. That's motherhood, plain and true." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. She looked down at Samuel, who reached up to touch her cheek, his tiny fingers leaving a smudge of dirt. Eliza, standing nearby with her husband Caleb, nodded fiercely. "Reverend's right," she said. "This whole town's seen Clara's heart. She's Samuel's mama, law or no law." Mr. Langley adjusted his spectacles, clearly unsettled. "The law doesn't bend to sentiment," he began, but Margaret raised a hand, silencing him. "I've seen enough of Clara to know she's more than sentiment," Margaret said. "I came here thinking I'd save Samuel from a life of hardship, but I was wrong. This town, this woman, they've given him something I never could in Boston, a home built on love." She paused, her voice softening. "I don't want to take him away. I want to stay, to be his aunt, to help Clara give him the life he deserves." Clara's heart swelled, a mix of relief and disbelief. "You'd stay here, in Silver Pines?" she asked, her voice trembling. Margaret smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through her once cold demeanor. "I've got money, Clara, and I can use it here, fix up the school, bring in a doctor, make this town better for Samuel and every child. Boston's my past. This is my future." She reached out, hesitating, then touched Clara's arm. "If you'll have me." Mr. Langley snapped his satchel shut, his irritation palpable. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, but Reverend Tate clapped him on the shoulder. "Life out here's irregular, friend," the preacher said with a grin. "You tell that judge we've settled this ourselves. Samuel's got a family. Now." Langley hesitated, then nodded curtly, mounting his horse and riding off toward Denver, his satchel bouncing against his side. As the dust settled, Clara looked at Margaret, then at Samuel, who giggled as a butterfly fluttered past. The mountains glowed in the afternoon sun, their peaks a promise of endurance. "Welcome to our family," Clara said softly, extending her hand. Margaret took it, their grip firm, a silent vow between two women who'd once been strangers. Months later, spring painted silver pines in vibrant greens, the aspens shimmering like a chorus of hope. Clara's cabin, now repaired with Caleb's help and Margaret's funds, stood sturdy against the mountain backdrop. Samuel, nearly 2, toddled across the meadow chasing wildflowers with Margaret, whom he called Aunt Maggie in his clear, bright voice. Clara hung laundry on a new line, her heart full as she watched them laugh together. A new figure appeared on the path, Mr. Harper, the young schoolteacher from Denver, his spectacles glinting as he waved. "Miss Whitmore, Miss Brennan," he called. "The new schoolhouse is ready. We're starting classes for the little ones next week and Samuel's welcome." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Clara felt a surge of pride. She'd been teaching Samuel his letters, but a proper school meant a future she'd barely dared dream of. Margaret joined her on the porch, Samuel perched on her hip. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I'm selling my Boston business. The money will build a clinic here, maybe a library. Samuel should grow up knowing he's loved, but also that he can be anything. A scholar, a miner, a dreamer." Clara nodded, her throat tight. "He'll know he has a home, no matter where he goes." She looked at Samuel, his blue eyes sparkling with joy, and realized this life, unplanned, imperfect, was the one she was meant to live. Percent, system, live. For those enchanted by this tale, let's step into the real history behind it. The late 19th century American West was a land of opportunity and hardship, especially for women like Clara. Mail-order brides were a common phenomenon, with thousands traveling west to marry strangers, often facing uncertainty or abandonment. Towns like Silver Pines, though fictional here, mirrored real mining communities where resilience and community spirit thrived amidst rugged conditions. This story reflects the strength of chosen families, a testament to the era's unyielding spirit. To learn more about this fascinating period, check out historical novels or documentaries on the American frontier. Your love for history will thank you. If Clara and Samuel's journey touched your heart, hit that like button to share the love. Subscribe and ring the bell for more stories of courage and romance in the Wild West. Drop a comment below. What would you do in Clara's shoes? Join our community of dreamers and storytellers, and let's keep the history alive together. What new adventures await Clara, Samuel, and Margaret in the ever-changing West? Only time and your subscription will tell.